So close those up real quick. Everybody close them up. Problems like this. Here's where people are having trouble is when they're simplifying these, they're getting the right answer, but it's not fully simplified. And I'll show you why. Most people are getting to the point where they're getting the steps pretty well though. So what's the first thing we're gonna do here if I'm trying to isolate x? Subtract 5 from both sides. Very good. So we subtract 5 and then we get the quantity 4x plus 2 squared equals negative 16. Now what?
Do what's in the perimeter.
Square root.
Square root, right? And think why? Think why? Because we're going bottom up. First thing we did was we took care of that loose term that was being added, right? So that layer is done. Next layer is multiplication. Well, there is no multiplication outside the parentheses, right? So then we get up to exponents. And so, see, I can't do anything inside the parentheses until I get to the top, right? So now I've got to undo the squared by square rooting. So if I square root both sides, I'm going to get 4x plus 2. And here's one of the things that people are forgetting almost all the time. More than half of you are forgetting this, I would say. Maybe not in this class, but what do I need to put there when I square root both sides? Plus or minus. You can't forget that. And this is where it goes. It can't go later. Sometimes people are wanting to put that into this, like later on, further down the line, they'll add a plus or minus randomly. It's when you take the square root that you get the plus or minus. And what do I do then? Here's another thing that we're getting better at. If I have the square root of a negative number, how do I change that? Lacey, what do I do? What do I do if I got what that negative sign inside turns into a what? No, well, it's going to, but what do I have to put outside the radical then? I. Good. Remember, the square root of a negative number is going to give us an I, right? Because that's like the square root of negative 1 times the square root of 16. And the square root of negative 1 equals I, right? So then this is going to become plus or minus I times the square root of 16. What's the square root of 16? 4. Okay, so everybody's okay with that? Okay. Now what do we do? So we've got this 4x plus 2. Here's another area where I see some issues. What's the next step to get the x by itself? Bailey, what am I going to do next? Minus 2. I'm going to subtract 2. Subtracting 2 is the same thing as adding what? Negative 2. So when I subtract 2 from both sides, I'm going to put the negative 2 in front of the plus or minus. Okay? That's important. That really makes it a lot easier. So now all I've got is a 4x over here. This stuff's gone, right? Last step. What's the last step? Vanessa, what's the last step to get the x by itself? Divide by 4. Okay, here's where I think the way I think the way I told you to do this, it's how I would do it, but I think maybe there's an easier way to think about how to simplify it. If you divide both sides by 4, look what happens. If I divide the whole thing by 4, the problem is it's difficult to see how to simplify that because I'm going to have to, in this case, split the fractions up because 2 over 4 reduces to something different than 4 over 4. So here's what you should do instead. This will make the whole process easier for you. Instead of dividing the whole side by 4, do the same thing, but break it into parts. Every term over here, just divide everything on that side individually by 4. It's the same thing, right? Dividing the whole right side by 4 means I'm just going to divide each term by 4. Agreed? But why is this easier? Well, now look what you get. X equals negative 2/4 reduces to what? Negative 1 over 2. Yeah, so negative 1/2. But what about this? What's 4i over 4? Just I. Yeah, the 4's cancel, don't they? So I'm going to get plus or minus I. Right? That's the correct fully simplified answer. What people were getting stuck with, if they wrote this as negative 2 plus or minus 4i over 4, they were either leaving it like that, or maybe they were writing it as -1 plus or minus 2i over 2. But that's not fully simplified, because the 2 over the 2 can be reduced more if I break them apart. See what I'm saying? So it's just better not to do it that way, I believe. I think you'll have an easier time if you just, when you do this step where you divide both sides by whatever's in front of x, just divide each term individually and then reduce each one individually. Okay, make sense? Okay, I'm gonna make you a deal here too. I think, how many people have done all the division of complex numbers? Anybody? You've done all, wow, that's good. Some of those were pretty hard, that's good. I'm gonna make the division optional. I'm not gonna test on it. I'm gonna make those problems worth 0 on the last assignment that I've given you, the last 4 problems, which makes the assignment pretty easy. If you do them all, and you get them all right, you have to get 100% on each of them, but if you do that, come show me, and I'll go in and I'll raise your lowest homework up to 100, okay? But it'll be kind of a bonus thing. I'm not gonna, the book doesn't cover that, the other Algebra 2 class isn't doing it. I think it's kind of good to know, but when we talk, later on, we'll just get back to it. You've already seen it a little bit, so eventually, if, when we need it, we'll talk about it then, okay? So that'll make things a little bit easier for you to get caught up, right? Here's our plan. You can start working now. I'll just talk to you about what we're gonna do. For the rest of the week, I'm gonna finish the chapter up tomorrow and Monday, and then we'll probably test over everything like Tuesday, Wednesday of the week after Thanksgiving, okay? So today's a great day to get caught up as much as possible. Get caught up, because tomorrow we're gonna go through a new concept, right? And that'll be it for the module 3, and then we'll take our test. Yeah, what I'll probably do is put a practice test out. Yeah, sure. Yeah, would you like a practice test?
Yeah.
Okay. Oh, perfect. Yeah.
Like during that week?
Yeah, no, that's good. I'll do that. You bet.